Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime on trending criminal cases. And there is no bigger case in all the world right now than the Sean Diddy Combs case. And yes, it happened. I got the shirt sent to me, and I am wearing it. Hashtag itty bitty Diddy. And we'll get some comments from our guests. I know that's not impartial journalism, but you know what? I don't think Diddy is the greatest guy in the world. And tough on him that I'm wearing an itty bitty Diddy t-shirt. It was one of the more explosive days yet. Former Sean Diddy Combs' assistant, a woman named Capricorn Clark, she told a Manhattan jury today that the hip-hop mogul actually kidnapped her, is the word she used, at gunpoint in 2011 to help him kill rapper Kid Cudi, who testified last week. So this is getting as wild can get, and all because Kid Cudi had been dating Cassie Ventura. Something tells me that Sean Diddy Combs has anger management issues. Capricorn Clark testified that she was forced into an Escalade, otherwise known as a big Cadillac, with Sean Combs and a security guard. Sean Combs had his gun on his lap. Other people testified to the fact that there were 3 guns being brought by security guards on that particular trip. And what followed, she said, was a brutal beating of Cassie Ventura, a burglary, and also a chilling threat. If anyone called the police, that they will also get effed up, using the actual word. It is the kind of testimony that you would have to hear to believe. And luckily, we've got some good sources inside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. And I was there earlier in the week. Going to introduce the best guest. You've got a great panel tonight. Starting off with a familiar face. Look at this. Tim Jansen on most other stories with us. Now diving into Diddy. Tim is a criminal defense attorney out of Tallahassee, Florida, and a former federal prosecutor. So he's going to be able to speak to these charges. You've got another Florida attorney. This one, the Florida state attorney at one point, now turned defense attorney, moving from being a public servant into being smart and raking in the dough like Tim Jansen. And last but not least, Vinoo Varghese. He's already done it. He went from prosecutor. Vinoo Varghese, he is a Harvard Law visiting faculty member. And by the way, Vinoo, Dave Aronberg went to Harvard undergrad and Harvard Law. And Aronberg, you know, he gives that little fund roughly $300 to $400 million a year. What's that? An endowment?
Nice.
Of it. Yes. Very, very, very kind of Dave Aronberg.
Minus a few of those zeros. Yes.
Yes. But Vinoo is also a white collar criminal defense attorney and a former prosecutor. So look at this. We've got 3 former prosecutors, 1 Florida state attorney, 1 former federal prosecutor, and defense attorneys, some who are criminal defense attorneys. And Emmy Nikolov with the breaking news. She didn't even let me get to it. She got to it first. But yes, this is true. 2 weeks almost to the day from her testimony. Who else but People Magazine or TMZ? I think they run the media world, those 2 entities. You make fun of like People Magazine and TMZ, but they get the information right, and they usually get it first. And they say that they've got a source that confirms that Cassie Ventura is at a New York City hospital. She is in labor with her 3rd baby with husband Alex Fine, who I happen to see every day outside the courthouse. And to put it mildly, he did not look happy with Sean Diddy Combs walking out of that courthouse every day. I think if there was an octagon there and he could have dragged Sean Diddy Combs out, the fight would have been on. Of course, the Bad Boy Records founder. He has been charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Tim Jansen, you are the only, I believe, former federal prosecutor. And yes, I am wearing my itty bitty tee. Tim Jansen.
Right.
The question, and it's come up as recently as today, you've got the RICO charges, and then you've got the human trafficking. And I understand with human trafficking, or sex trafficking, not human trafficking, sex trafficking, you've got force, fraud, and coercion that are necessary, one of those three components. But there are still a lot of legal analysts who are questioning these RICO charges, and we'll get into this kidnapping testimony to see if it brings us any closer. But can you kind of explain to I don't know, the non-attorneys like myself, a little bit more about the RICO aspect to this and whether or not the federal government is going to be able to meet this burden, I guess, this threshold?
Well, the RICO is the higher level charge. It's for an ongoing called enterprise that consists, and it's a continuous enterprise that carries on criminal activities in multiple different ways, multiple different crimes. The penalties are very, very harsh. Normally you have more than two people charged, but in this case, they may have only charged him, and they've given immunity to people they're going to have come testify about the organization that can put together and show how it was formed, the goal, how it kept going. You hear all these witnesses talk about the enforcers that were doing things, that did these things, and procured people for these jobs, procured the Johns, I guess you would say, to come in and do that. So you have cases, and I've seen overturned. We had a client that was overturned. He was a deputy sheriff that was doing bad things, apparently. And they charged him with a RICO and convicted him of a RICO. And it was overturned because you couldn't say that his boss, the sheriff, was a criminal enterprise. So that got overturned. So they have to prove others participated in this organization to make it an enterprise. And it has to be an ongoing one, continuous, not just a one-time, 6-month thing. It has to be ongoing. So, and jurors get confused about that. But when you throw up enough mud and everything else, sometimes jurors just go along in federal court.
But Tim, I got to ask you, legally speaking, what does ongoing mean? What does that encompass?
Well, that it's not precise, right? It's one of those definitions. It could be it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years. Certainly, it could be any 2 to 3 or 4 year time period. Certainly, a 6-year period would show if he's conducting these activities over a lengthy period of time. I think that would satisfy.
I have ADHD and I'm thinking of something. Of course, I'm listening to Tim, but I had an idea in light of my shirt. All these big cases, they always have like something, like some kind of phrase or line. So moving forward, we will take a poll from STS Nation. We'll choose a line. We'll get the shirts made, and then we'll have them in the merch store, and maybe we can donate a percentage to whomever we are seeking justice for. How about that? And I don't know. It's my idea of the day. Dave Arenberg. The prosecution came out, the government, the federal government today, and they said, hey, we are way ahead of schedule. This was their 17th and only witness today. But they said instead of our anticipated 6 weeks of case in chief, we should now be done in 5 weeks. Should we believe them? We've had other people on who say that this trial will end much sooner than 8 weeks. But if they go 5 instead of 6, is that really a huge difference? Will this end more quickly than most people think? Oh, and you have to unmute yourself because you are a man with a lot of wisdom. We have to hear you.
How did that happen? I mean, right? It's like,
I don't know, but I love when the guys that go to Harvard they don't know how to unmute themselves. It gives me such joy.
I didn't know the mute was even on. That's so bizarre. So, hey, it's not surprising. This happens a lot. These lengthy trials, prosecutors will estimate, but sometimes the witnesses go quicker. Sometimes the defense does not bother to cross-examine witnesses that the prosecution may think are going to be cross-examined, like Cassie's mother. So I'm not that surprised. I don't think it makes that big of a difference whether it's 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I think it's good that the jury is not sequestered, because that does put extra pressure on the jury just to get it done fast, because they want to go home to see their families as opposed to getting it done right. So far, so good for the prosecution. I would say, I know you didn't ask me this, my friend Joel, but I do think the prosecution is ahead, at least on the human trafficking and prostitution counts. I am not sure they have totally established the racketeering, which Tim correctly says is the big whammy here. But yeah, I do think they're doing well on the other counts and not doing bad on racketeering. Today was a good day on racketeering with Miss Clark on the stand. But I just think you still need more to show an ongoing criminal enterprise where everything is done to try to benefit the boss.
Yeah, well, what's interesting here, and Dave, I want to just come right back to you before we get to Vinoo. What's interesting here, and I mean this with all due respect, I really do, but even the attorneys seem to not fully, it's like almost like this RICO charge, Dave, is almost like a gray area. And I know they were using it to lasso in former mobsters. That's really the reason. But, you said you don't know if they're there yet. What would they, in your opinion, what do they need to do to wrap that up into a tidy little bow?
Right now it seems a little bit ad hoc, and you wanted an organized, ongoing criminal enterprise. Like, I think that's helpful to jurors when they see something organized, like the mob. That's what RICO was invented for, is for the mob, where you have, capos and lieutenants and all these people down your line. Here, it seems a little bit ad hoc, where it's Diddy out there saying, I'm jealous. Let's go get Kid Cudi. That sort of plays into the defense here, where they're trying to say this is a run-of-the-mill domestic violence case of just a guy who is jealous. And we've seen this all over the place. If the prosecution wanted to take him down, they should have charged him with domestic violence at the state level. But instead, we've got this whole racketeering where you have this enterprise where you have all these different employees trying to work for the common goal of helping the boss with his weird sexual desires. It's a little tougher to prove that, but not impossible. Ask R. Kelly, who sits in a prison cell today because he was convicted of racketeering, among other things.
Yeah, and I have a funny feeling that Sean Combs is going to be in the same position very soon as R. Kelly is right now. Vinoo, I got to ask you, it's hard for me to see. What are those little guys behind you on your dark, cold windowsill in May in New York City? And that
various bobbleheads.
Oh,
got Larry Johnson. Let's go Knicks tonight.
Yeah, I forgot about the next one. I have to end this early, right?
I got Mr. Spock. I got Mike Piazza. I got Judge Thomas Tang from the Ninth Circuit.
I love it.
I got some more over there. Captain America's there, somewhere over there on that side.
You never stop being a kid. I won't tell you how old I am, but I'm old-ish, and I've got all my UFC bobbleheads in my TV room. So. You never grow up when you're a guy. Wesley John Holmes, he is grown up. He is an Aussie living in Tokyo. He could never wear my itty bitty Diddy shirt because they're way too sophisticated in Asia and in Tokyo to wear such ridiculous things. But Vinoo, to you, let's go Knicks. You're right. I have a new Knicks shirt. I'm going to wear that tonight for the game. But let's just stick on this RICO notion. Again, Tim was a federal prosecutor. Even he is saying it's sort of a nebulous definition. He's not sure if the jurors get it. You heard Dave Ehrenberg say we need a little bit more. Your thoughts? I mean, are they struggling in that particular aspect of this trial, the federal government?
I think that Tim hit on something that's very important, which is that what federal juries tend to do. And when I was on your show a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about the fact that the lawyers don't get to pick their juries in federal court. And so, you don't have an opportunity to really figure out who you don't want on the jury. You just the judge says, hey, can you be fair and impartial? Stands, from this high perch, and most jurors are just going to go along with it. And so in this case, you have all these ugly allegations that make him look like a sick, demented, human being. And you got, all these people coming out and firebombing, arson, sex parties, and baby oil, and more baby oil. And I think that, the jury's just going to go, at the end of this, they want to get out, right? Whether it goes 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and federal prosecutors do this all the time. And so they'll tell you a case is going to last this long, and then ends up being their testimony is this long. I just experienced that in federal court in Brooklyn. But, I'm used to it. Been doing it for a long time on this side. And so, look, in terms of whether they can prove it or not, the reality is they are likely going to get a conviction, and then it'll get sorted out on appeal, and Combs is going to spend, probably about 4 to 5 years in jail before he gets a possible reversal on appeal. And I think that these cases are scrutinized by the circuit or the intermediate appellate court. Chances to get into the Supreme Court are rare, though. In this case, you may get there, especially if he gets affirmed or
Vinoo, just
happens.
just clarify that for me, because if I heard you correctly, you basically said you think a guilty verdict is coming, but an appeal is likely to that he's more. There's a good chance of him winning on appeal. Why?
Well, I'm not going to say there's an absolute good chance. I mean, generally, statistically speaking, there's very low chance, right? I don't know what the exact stats are. Probably less than 5% of cases getting reversed, but this is the kind of case where the government overshoots, and they go in there and they throw a lot of stuff in there, and you've got to wonder. And my friend who went to Harvard Law School, it was the best part about there being visiting faculty and Professor Ron Sullivan's trial advocacy workshop is that I didn't go to Harvard. I went to Brooklyn Law.
Dave,
they invite me.
Hold on.
There together?
I do September.
Oh,
January.
I taught the first week in January. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't be in Boston in the cold. No way. So I do September where it's nice and fall. I mean, in Cambridge and stuff.
I took what I could get. Yeah.
Yeah. So they invite me in September. And it's fun. I've been doing it the last 5+ years, minus the 2020 when it was locked down. So, and thank you for those 100 millions of that you donate, because that helps pay for my expenses when I'm there, So
Dave's among the highest donors at Harvard.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying is that here's the problem. They know, and again, I wasn't, a former federal prosecutor. I was a state prosecutor my first 6 years, but I've been on the defense side for the last 20, and I would say for the last 15 plus doing mostly federal work. And I'm pretty sure, and our friend who was the former federal prosecutor could tell us if this is true, if he's allowed to be honest about this. So they teach over at the DOJ, hey, just throw it out there. The jury's going to get confused. The appellate courts are going to say, it was harmless, whatever error was there, and so that's the insidious thing about the system. You don't get to pick the juries. You get an appellate court that kind of just looks the other way most of the time, unless it's a case of interest. And I think this could be a case of interest. And I think just from everything I've read and looking at the initial charges, it seems that they're going overboard here, and they've gone overboard. So, but I do think if he wants a chance of an acquittal, he's going to take the stand. He's going to have to take the stand.
That's
explain
interesting.
himself.
Wow.
Otherwise, he's going in. He's probably losing on appeal. Well, I didn't say he's a good chance. I'm saying that this is a case of interest where he could win, but or he could end up spending the next 25 years to life in jail. So if he wants to avoid that chance, he may have to take the stand.
Yeah, that's interesting. Good Jane said this, not me, but she's probably right. No way a man named John Wesley Holmes can wear the itty bitty ditty shirt. I forgot about that. So my bad. Tim Jansen, a couple of questions for you. A couple of good ones in here. Someone asked, why is every criminal defense attorney, a prosecutor? Is that just the training ground for most of you guys to go through the prosecutorial world? Does anyone come out of law school and become a Tim Jansen right away, or do you have to season yourself as a prosecutor?
I find it's jurisdiction by jurisdiction. In Tallahassee, most of the federal prosecutors were career prosecutors. When I was in Tampa, most of the prosecutors ended up going out in private practice. It all depends. I think Tallahassee has that mentality of state government. You get a good government job, you enjoy what you're doing, you're not hustling, chasing clients, you got a good retirement, they stay. And then there's people who enjoy the challenge and reap the benefits of being in private practice if you're successful. But I did want to answer some of the questions about federal court. There is a reason why you have a 97% conviction rate, right? You have the judge picks the jury, okay? When you see in the jury selection, you go in these courtrooms, you see these grandiose courtrooms. You see the judge sitting way up there. You see bailiffs all over the place. The veneer, you're like, this is serious stuff. You got FBI, you got DEA, you got all the big investigative agencies. Then you have, what do you have? You have the rules of evidence or the rules of inclusion, meaning they include evidence, where in state courts, there are more rules of exclusion. They kick stuff out. So in the federal courts, they believe that two adversaries let everything come in, and a neutral jury, usually picked by the judge, will come up with the right verdict. And it doesn't take long for jurors to look around, and they don't want to be part of an investigation for jury tampering. So they just ride along, smooth talking prosecutor. He gets to go first, gets to go last. And if you have a semblance of a case, pretty good witnesses, and you're able to close it, it's a nice little package that they open up. And trials are, they always say it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, but things change, right? They think they have to call more witnesses than they have to. Cross-examination is much shorter than they thought, or the judge rides them. I can tell you, I had a judge ride me in a trial. It was like 100 and something counts. Mr. Jansen, you haven't introduced any evidence in this case. And I said, well, Judge, you admitted 100 pieces of evidence already. We're going to tie it up. So they get bored. Judge gets bored. So there's reasons why trials. Go ahead.
Yeah. Tim, what do you do when a judge says that to you? Do you go home and cry to your wife? What do you do?
No. She wasn't my wife at that point.
But you're then going. No, what do you do when a judge yells at you? That's got to be, difficult.
That same judge held me. He kidnapped me because, when your verdict goes out, I went to lunch with the agents and we went somewhere and we didn't get back within 10 minutes. They had a question. The judge made me stay in the courthouse until before the jury got here, until after they went home. I could not leave the courthouse. So he was a tough judge. That's why I'm in private practice now.
Exactly. Dave, to you, what Vinoo just said, and I've heard other people say this, that Diddy might be backed up, particularly in the sex trafficking area, to such a degree that the only thing that might benefit him in terms of getting any sort of leniency or a possible acquittal is for him to get up on the stand and say, look, I am a temperamental person. I'm not the greatest person. I have a tendency to get angry and I'm hot-headed. And therefore, you shouldn't convict me. Is there a chance, big girl for life right here, no way Diddy's getting on the stand? That's my question. Any chance, realistically, because Vinoo just put it out there, that we see Sean Diddy Combs take that stand?
I think only as a Hail Mary pass. I think if the defense thinks they're going down, they may consider it, because Diddy, after all, is a performer. He probably believes he can perform in front of this jury. He is dressing like Mr. Rogers already. Now, in fact, you call it an oatmeal jacket. I call it tan. I don't know. Oatmeal, is that a color? But
it's like a bluish gray, I think. It came out of nowhere.
What it is? Okay. Yeah. I thought oatmeal was like tan color. All right, but fair enough.
Yeah.
Oatmeal, and he's got.
By the way, there's the guy that's actually donating $2 billion a year to the Harvard endowment. It's the branding guy that came up with the color oatmeal. That's the guy who's actually got he's sitting on like in a castle somewhere. That's what they do now. No, companies don't have colors that like normal color. You don't see like a yellow sweatshirt. It's like banana fade. Like it's always. Anyway, go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Well, I mean, if he takes a stand, it opens the door to lots of evidence that wouldn't come in otherwise. But maybe he has no other choice because what's interesting is that there's not that much of a difference between the two sides as far as the facts. I mean, Diddy is pretty much admitting that he was a bad boyfriend at times, that he was jealous, and that this was a domestic violence case. They're just reframing a human trafficking case as a state prosecution for domestic violence, and this is a federal prosecution. So they are just saying, yeah, your eyes are not deceiving you. That video is what it is, but that's jealousy. I was grabbing for the phone, and it's a jealousy thing. It shouldn't even be here in federal court. So maybe they do this as a Hail Mary, just to show once again that, yes, he's sorry for what he did. He did all this stuff, but none of this is a federal crime. And after all, who would you believe? The schlub who's making, government wages, or me, a guy who lives on Miami Beach who makes $250 million and has to force Cassie's mother to pay me back $20,000. Oh, yeah. I don't think they're going to go that far, but you see where I'm going. He's going to try to use his charm and his oatmeal jacket and his gray hair and his glasses. But in the end, I don't think he takes a stand. It's just a last resort.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. And it also opens that proverbial door. Vinoo, back to you. So, and that's what I was looking for on my phone. This is not official yet, but there are reports today out there. So this witness number 3 had gone MIA, and people were kind of wondering, well, what's going on? And the reports today are witness number 3 is a done deal. It is not happening. By done deal, I mean that witness will not be at this trial and will not testify. How does that impact the government's case when they were, sorting all this out and preparing for trial? I think that they were assuming that they would get witness number 3. Now they don't have her. What happens?
I think that's, I don't know, is it MIA or Mia? I mean, that's the, I don't know if that's the woman, that's the single mom.
If someone I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but if someone in STS Nation will know it, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, I think she's the woman who his former assistant said they'd been kicked to the ground. It's definitely I don't know. The government's gonna, they could probably spin it or throw it out there that somehow Sean made her disappear. You know what I'm saying? Like it wouldn't surprise me if there was an offhanded comment along that line. There'd be an objection sustained, and then the judge would instruct the jury to disregard that statement. And of course, on appeal, actually, I didn't say of course. I mean, I say because there's 2 other lawyers on this panel. The jury's presumed to have followed instructions. So the question is, things like that happen. And I will say a couple things. I want to add a couple things about, and I mentioned this last time I was on. I have a client in the same secure place in the MDC in Brooklyn where Diddy is, and he does have gray hair. He seemed very nice. He was he's been very nice to my client who's been there. And I met with, you mentioned R. Kelly a little while ago. It's another case where I think the government went way overboard. And I had met with R. Kelly in the Chicago MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, because at one point his family had got me out there to potentially represent him. But he ended up not signing on with me. I also thought that case was just, I remember, commenting on that for CBS News at the time. But I just think that whatever it is, they're just throwing so much crap out there. The jury is just going to be exhausted. And I think Tim put it perfectly. I mean, that's as good and clear explanation of the federal jury system as I've heard. And they're just going to convict because they got nothing better to do, or that's what they want to get out of it. And they're going to sit down and really go through everything related to all this. They're going to be like, he probably did it. he's probably a bad guy. I mean, unfortunately, you're stuck with who you get because the judge deemed them, good enough to be on the jury without much else.
These are interesting points. I want to come back to like this notion of the federal system just being overwhelming for a defendant. But first, Tim Jansen, to you as the former federal prosecutor, and I'm going to weave in some of the testimony, and I'll do that real quick. But the day started with Capricorn on the stand and basically saying that she starts talking about Suge Knight now because she, I think, had worked or had contact with Death Row Records. And Sean Combs, in the initial interview, basically said, if anything happens, I'll have to kill you. Again, because she did once work for Death Row. She testified that she was working 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. and that Sean Diddy Combs still owed her $80,000 in OT. She was only making $65,000 a year. You think you're working for a celebrity and you think you're going to be making a lot of money as the assistant to that celebrity, but I guess it's like the news business where they think you're doing them a favor. And so only the big stars get paid big bucks. And in this case, obviously it was Sean Diddy Combs. But eventually, Tim Jansen, they get to a point here with Capricorn Clark where she actually uses the word kidnapped. Now, this has to do with the torching of Kid Cudi's Porsche. It gets firebombed, apparently, according to previous witnesses. It was all the doing of Sean Diddy Combs, even though there's nothing forensically to link him. But what about this notion that she was, quote unquote, kidnapped? Does that fit into this idea of RICO, or is that still under the sex trafficking part of this? How does that all play?
Well, kidnapping would be a crime that if he was doing kidnapping, that would fit into a RICO organization. If it's a pattern of conduct that he would point guns, force people to do things against their will, took phones away from people. I believe didn't Capricorn say she took her phone and called London? So she had her phone. She was able to call London and call Cassie. She certainly could have called 911.
Yeah.
We get people charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment in domestic cases where they take the phone so they can't call 911 and they can't leave. They charge them with false imprisonment, which is similar to kidnapping. She claimed he had a firearm. And then I think she told her friend, I was afraid of the lions. I had to go because I was afraid of the lions. Her state of mind, it's almost like aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Were you in fear? Yes, I was in fear. Okay. Did you feel like you couldn't leave? No, I didn't. Why? Because he had a gun and I've seen his violent proclivities and I wasn't about to go. It wasn't my choice. I had to go. And then the jury's going to say, well, if I was in that girl's shoes, would I feel the same way, knowing what I know, seeing what I've seen, and guns and violence and torching, and probably will.
Yeah. Tim, also, just one other thing with the sex trafficking charges, and then back to Dave Ehrenberg. But with the sex trafficking, this is my oldest friend calling me right in the middle of a podcast. How dare he? What about where do the escorts, if at all, where do they fit into this? Because they were being transported around too. And I get a lot of questions asked of me, and I'm not a lawyer, so no one should ever ask me any questions, and I'm not that smart. So whether they pertain to the law or otherwise, you're better off asking someone else the questions. But what about escorts, Tim Jansen? How did they fit into this? They were being flown from Vegas to LA, LA
Right.
to here and there. Are they part of the charges here?
They will be, because to my knowledge, prostitution is only legal in one state in the United States. That's in Vegas. And when you fly people for the purpose of sexual activity, they usually call it a Hobbs Act. And if you have any of them that are underage, that's sex trafficking. Or if they're in a position that they can't say no, and they're brought there and they're drugged, and then they're forced to have sex with multiple partners against their will, that would be sex trafficking, especially traveling across state lines.
Yeah. So I just want to fill in the gaps with the testimony. So this goes back to this morning. Capricorn Clark, Diddy's former assistant, is on the stand. after talking about making 65 grand a year and developing alopecia, which is hair loss. She moved on to a lie detector test. By the way, Sean Diddy Combs is literally responsible for 2 medical diagnoses so far in this trial. One is alopecia, and the escort said they gave him erectile dysfunction from watching him beat Cassie. So we've got 2 literal medical diagnoses as a result. I've been keeping tabs. Let's see if we get to 3. The lie detector ordeal. After being accused of stealing jewelry, Capricorn Clark is subjected to 5 days of polygraph tests. And the polygrapher here, Dave Arenberg, now he's the one threatening her. The last person was, I think it was David James, who was an assistant. And he said that he was threatened, not threatened, but he was told by the polygrapher that he was the best, that he was the FBI's best, even though I don't think there's any truth to that. And this polygrapher essentially says to Capricorn Clark, if you did steal this jewelry, you're quote unquote going to be in the East River. So let me just hold that up right there. I mean, this seems to be part of a bit of a criminal conspiracy here. Does this play to the RICO charges?
Sure does. I mean, that goes to what I was saying earlier, as far as an organized, ongoing criminal enterprise. You got the lie detector operators who are now in on this. You know, they're like, it's like Paulie Walnuts is operating the lie detector test. That's the kind of thing that jurors are gonna be like. They're not used to. Usually have nerds who are doing these lie detector tests. You don't have, mafioso people who are saying we're going to throw you in the East River. And so that tells you something about Diddy and this whole operation. So yeah, that is helpful to the prosecution. And plus, if they get involved with extortion, that's a predicate crime under RICO too. So yeah, I think it does move the needle. I just think they should show more. I mean, but the fact is, when you've got these employees who are threatening people, that's what they need. They need more employees who are threatening people on behalf of the boss. Diddy.
Yeah, there you go. Dave's got to run in a minute, but Dave, let me get this question into you that kind of came up already, and Vinoo sort of laid it out, but I just want to get your take. I mean, are the resources of the federal government, and this is a person, Dave, who was once the Florida state attorney, so he was in a state jurisdiction, but is the federal government so powerful? I mean, I guess the question is it almost to an unfair advantage? Because I think Tim said 97%, but someone told me that as of 2024, the federal government conviction rate was up to 99%. I don't know. I don't know what could be done about it, if anything should be done about it, but is the game rigged when it comes to the federal government?
Well, it's definitely slanted against the defendant. And if your name is not Mark Cuban, it's really hard to win. I mean, it's very hard to win because, as Tim and Vinoo said, they have institutional advantages. But here's some of them. I always used to joke that if you're being prosecuted, better hope it's from my office and not the feds, because the feds have these built-in advantages that we don't have at the state level. Like, for example, limited discovery. At the state level, we have to give everything up right away. Our victims have to appear before opposing counsel for depositions. The federal government is much more limited discovery. Sometimes you don't find out what they got until like right at the trial. So that's a big advantage. Also, they have unlimited budgets. I know that technically the budgets are what they are, but the federal government prints money. The state government has a balanced budget amendment. So that's a difference. Also, the feds have draconian penalties, much more harsh penalties than we have at the state. I mean, you lie to an investigator, you get 10 years. Ask Martha Stewart. She didn't go to prison based on insider trading. She went to prison for lying, and they will go after you for that. And then you have other things like the fact that their cases are discretionary. We at the state level, we have to keep putting out what comes in. Like, you got DUIs, we got to do it with lots of time constraints. The feds get to sit back and choose what cases they want, and they can build up cases for years before they file. So they can drain your resources. They can hit you with the draconian penalties. They can limit your discovery. Yeah, it's tough to go against federal prosecutors.
Dave Arenberg, always a gentleman and a scholar. I love having you here. We got to catch up and do lunch and continue donating to Harvard. They need your help. Yeah,
that's a funny comment. I've stopped doing that for a while, but hopefully Harvard will will improve some of their policies, and I'll get to donate again soon. But Vinoo, it's great to be on with you for the first time, and Tim, always a pleasure, my friend. I'm sorry to leave early, but let's do it again.
Dave, we got to do lunch.
Dave.
See you
You
soon.
go watch the Knicks, right? That's
Yeah,
where
go
you're
ahead.
at.
Well, I was at the
It's a
Panther game
Miami
last
Heat.
night.
It's a Miami Heat fan here.
I'm a Heat fan, so I don't know what to do about this game, but I'm a Panthers fan now, and that last night's game was depressing, but we're still going to win the Stanley Cup.
Yes, you are. And go Knicks.
Good luck.
See you soon, Dave.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye, Dave.
So Vinoo, to you, we don't miss a beat here. Misdemeanor. I love Dave, like a brother, but Dave is also, I feel, because he was the Florida State attorney, that I have to like behave usually when he's on. True or false from misdemeanor OG, Vinoo? Only 2 predicates out of 8 need to be proven for RICO. And while answering that, tell us some of the predicates that are involved.
So here, let me pull up my. He is charged in count 1 to racketeering conspiracy, and the 2 counts of sex trafficking by fraud or coercion. So look, the underlying things, in this case, they're going to throw out a bunch of stuff, and for them, this is what's going to, it's going to stick. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so whether they've proven it or not, the sheer amount of stuff they're throwing out is what's going to carry them through the day.
There you go. You hear it again. They're just going to overwhelm here. But Tim Jansen, again, I'm just going to run through some of the testimony to catch everybody up to speed. So this is Capricorn Clark, the former assistant. She talks about some early abuse that she received at the hands of Sean Diddy Combs at his Miami home all the way back to 2006. And Tim, you talked about like a pattern of this. So this goes, a lot of this goes back 20 years or so. But she says that Sean Combs shoved her, meaning Capricorn Clark, 30 yards because she had complained a little bit about the work environment and he said, quote, "You want a life? You cannot have that here." That's an understatement of the year. She also went on to say that she would get ecstasy, Molly, prescription pills. Once she got cocaine for Diddy in France, and that she saw him give drugs repeatedly to girlfriends. She also testified to the fact that Sean Combs would use aliases like Frank White, and that he traveled with cameras. This is part of this, that he was filming and coercing, and drugs. That's part of this. Baby oil and lube. That's all way too much a part of this. And then the jury is shown an email, I guess, that Cassie sent her referencing different sorts of threats. And by the way, misdemeanor added pneumonia to the list of medical maladies that Sean Diddy Combs is responsible for. But we get to 2011, Tim, and Sean Combs threatens to kill Capricorn Clark over the Cassie Ventura Kid Cudi romance. So again, Kid Cudi is blindsided by this. He didn't know that Cassie Ventura, is dating Kid Cudi. And he says to Capricorn Clark, "I should kill you, the B word, and cut her face." From a legal perspective, how damning is that when it comes to these charges? And then I'll ask you what the jury is thinking.
Well, it is damaging, especially now the jury's already seen how he beat up in the elevator, in the hallway. His act of violence towards women is very proven here. It won't play well with anybody. Women won't like it. Men won't like it. So he's already starting at a severe disadvantage. He beats women. All right. What else does he do? He drugs people. He drugs underage people. He threatens to kill people. He holds people in their hands, pays them little, makes them work like dogs, makes them do the dirty work for him. He's the top dog. He's the leader of this organization. And they're going to go all the way and show everything he has people do for the benefit of him, right? And every crime you can get, you talked about sex trafficking, extortion, drug trafficking. You know, giving drugs to these girls, he may not be getting money, but he is drug trafficking. You know, I tell my clients all the time, if you give drugs to your friends, you're still a drug dealer. You're just a bad one. You're still committing a crime. And they don't see it that way. You know, I didn't deal drugs. I just gave it to my friends. You're a drug dealer. And they're going to paint such a dirty picture of him. I do not think he'll testify. One, because if he does, he loses insufficiency of the evidence in an appeal, right? So he loses that because the district court will say, or the appellate court will say, the jury can base their verdict on your credibility alone. So his lawyers, hopefully he's got appellate lawyers working with him. He's got experienced criminal lawyers that know you're not only in the district court, you're in the appellate court. If you testify, you lose an issue, especially a sufficiency on the RICO. So is it worth you testifying and losing that? Probably not, because I don't think he's going to sway anybody. I don't think he'll have any credibility. And so I think they're building a pretty strong case so damaging to him that it's going to be hard to overturn it. And the jurors are going to be afraid to not vote guilty. I mean, people don't realize that. You got a lot of people watching this. Now, could you have somebody on this jury that has an incentive? Someone that's got they don't like the government, or they don't like the way he's been treated. One or two on that jury can be holdouts, but they don't hold out long in federal court. State court, they hold out long enough, you get mistrials. Federal courts, they'll get the Allen charge, they'll do it again. And the longer the trial goes, the longer they're going to make them stay out and render a verdict.
These are all great points. Ned Smith also making a great point. We found out last week that Sean Combs puts applesauce on hamburgers. There was a whole debate about that, but she says that in itself is a crime against humanity. Then I got emails that some guy, his recipe involved. Tim, you're the courtroom chef. By the way, if you don't follow Tim, it's at Courtroom Chef on. Have you ever heard of putting applesauce on a hamburger?
No, that's sacrilegious.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I had
like
some
putting ketchup on spaghetti.
Yes, someone told me that they had a recipe that involved a little bit of applesauce embedded into the ground beef, but this was literally layering it on like mustard or ketchup.
Or cheese on fish.
Yeah, well, that's not quite as
Hey, Windsor.
Thing. There's Windsor, Tim Jansen's dog. Vinoo, to you. So there's two kind of possibilities as it relates to this jury of 8 men and 4 women. On the one hand, there could be a quiet fan on this jury, and there could be jury nullification as a result of this. How do you protect against that? But the flip side is, at this point, they might hate him so much that even if, I don't know, they don't meet the standard of, let's say, the RICO racketeering charges, maybe these jurors are like, this guy is such a horrible human being that we're going to find him guilty anyway. I mean, how do you weigh those two concerns as an attorney?
So, look, the idea the question you asked about how do you protect against that? Well, as a defense lawyer, you don't want to protect against that. It's, if you can walk out of court and have another trial, that's a win in this case, right? I mean, look, he's still going to stay in, unfortunately, but that would be, a win for the defense if he's not convicted or if there is a mistrial. But I think Tim, everything he's saying is correct. And you're just going to have too much going on. As far as somebody quietly being on there, usually people during jury selection will say things like that to get out of jury selection, right? So the people that'll say, I don't trust prosecutors, is a way to get themselves out of jury duty. So I've yet to see a case where somebody's quietly holding that in because people are too talkative, right? So I've got a good friend of mine who is a libertarian. He's high up in the Libertarian Party, Larry Sharp. And I don't know if you know him or know who he is. He's been on Joe Rogan's show. He ran for governor of New York under the Libertarian Party. And one of his things, he's not a lawyer, one of the things that he talks about is getting more cases nullified and telling people not to be so forthright with their dislike of prosecutors so they can get on and stay on a jury. So, look, that may be right. And so what Tim also, I just want to add something about what Tim was talking about the evidence. You and I spoke about this a few weeks ago, right? That what if Combs is going to testify, it does basically, and he's convicted, it basically bulletproofs the appeal. The question then is his team, and he's got a huge team there, is they've probably assessed to him what are the probabilities of winning on appeal. So in order to win on appeal, the chances are he doesn't testify. So it can be pure legal issues and whether these legal issues are preserved. But if the calculus is that if they prove or they win without him testifying, and that's going to be upheld, then the Hail Mary that Dave was talking about earlier before he left is that he testifies to give it a shot of potentially walking out. And so that's the calculus that I imagine his lawyers have gone through. And as I said, when I visit my client, every morning he had somebody from his team there. I would visit my client every couple months. It wasn't a Diddy case, but it was in the news. But there was somebody there every day because I could see the logs, and I know half the lawyers that are representing him. They're all solid. So I imagine that some calculus has been made, and that they're not going to, okay, hey, Diddy, you testify now. They've prepped him to testify, and they're going to make a decision to see where the trial went and whether they think they have a shot at winning.
Yeah,
so I think he's there's a chance.
Yeah. Tim, to piggyback
Joe,
on that. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
So I'm looking back, I've been fortunate. I've gotten 4 acquittals in federal court.
Wow.
And I'm looking back to decide, did my client testify? And 3 of the acquittals, my client did testify. And the 4th one, we got a judgment of acquittal after the government's case, which was very rare. So I would say if they really want to get an acquittal,
he won what's called a Rule 29. Sorry,
I
Tim.
did. And it was the first one
done.
for this judge, 20 years on the bench. And it was really even better. We were being paid by an insurance policy, right? It was officers and directors, and they were slow paying us. And the only reason we get paid is if we got an acquittal. So when we called the insurance company and told them we got an acquittal, it cost them several $1 million. But I mean, you talk about skin in the game. Skin was in the game on that one.
Wow. Inside baseball here. This is why we got the best guests in all of true crime. Tim, a couple of questions that are sort of coming, great questions, but they're not ones that I expected. We keep hearing about the security team that was basically running guns with Sean Combs to go get Kid Cudi and to try to go get Suge Knight.
Right.
What about the responsibility or lack thereof of those security guards? I mean, do they face potential? I mean, do they lean on these guys? Are we going to hear, do you think, from these security guards?
100%. They'll find the weakest link. They'll find the one that's got family, the one that's an outlier in the organization, the one they think they can flip, and threaten him with, charges to get them to come forward. They want somebody on the inside to confirm the organization and that everything was done for Diddy. We worked on his behalf. We weren't independent freelancers doing things. We did what he told us. We were paid by the Big Bad Boy Records. And that will talk. I believe that's what's coming up tomorrow. They got people from inside the organization.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about tomorrow for 1 sec, because the next 2, I don't know. I'm sure you are correct, but the next 2 witnesses, Tim, are going to be members of the LAFD, Los Angeles Fire Department, and the LAPD, who responded to the destruction and torching of Kid Cudi's Porsche. So how do they figure in? Because there's not even evidence linking Diddy. It's a secret. I mean, it's an open secret. Everyone knows that he was involved, but there's no evidence, Tim, linking him. So what are these experts who are from the fire department and the police department in LA, what are they going to say tomorrow that's going to help the government?
Well, they're going to have to prove it was an arson and the car didn't burn up on its own. And they're going to, it's going to circumstantial link him to the jealousy, to the threats, and then all of a sudden his car is torched, right? Not an ironclad link, but it's sufficient enough. The court will let him make that inference, let him make that argument. And, you throw enough stuff up there, I remember in law school, people, when you don't really know the subject, you throw every term, every legal term on that paper and hope that professor gives you some credit for some of the ideas you put, right? And so maybe that's what the government sometimes, they throw so much up there that something is going to stink and something's going to stick on him, and we're all going to go home with a conviction. That's what's going to happen.
Thank you, Tim. I'm about to sneeze.
Don't worry.
Live on air, sneeze. I think that might be my first live sneeze ever. TK Sass. Back to Vinoo here. Can't this third witness, Gina, that's who it is, can't she be arrested for not showing up to court? I assume she was subpoenaed for this trial, Vinoo. So what? Just back to her for a moment. What's the deal here? How do you just go missing and are allowed to not appear? I mean, she could be in Thailand for all we know, but what happens here?
Yeah, the answer is sure. I mean, sorry about my lights. It's when I sit in one place, the sensor goes off. But hopefully you're okay with the backup lights. But the answer is yes. I mean, you can. If they get her, they could potentially hold her, prosecutor for contempt of court. But the question is, are they going to do that? I think at this point that probably not. I had a case in Southern District, the same courthouse, where a witness he went on the lam. He was a government witness, and they didn't. The trial went on. He didn't show up, even though the FBI went looking for him, and he came back after the trial, and the government never went after him. So I don't think they are. I don't think it's a good look for them, particularly if she was a victim of domestic violence.
Yeah. By the way, this is a funny Freudian slip here. She's saying hi to STS, but it's fitting. Hi, STD. We all know what that is. We're talking about Sean Combs. Tim Jansen, a couple more questions, and we'll get final thoughts, and we'll wrap this up on what feels like a Monday, but it is a real Tuesday and a fake Monday. Tim Jansen, to you. So Capricorn Clark also testifies today that she saw Sean Combs brutally kick Cassie. What about, this notion that it's basically like third-party testimony here? Other witnesses say that they saw it firsthand, but this witness is saying, you literally saw it, but she's basically saying, that she's describing it. And in some cases, she didn't necessarily see it, is the point I'm making. In some instances, she did see it. But what about cases where she's not actually seeing it, but hearing about it? I don't know if objections were made in court. Would you object as the defense? How do you handle that?
Well, if you don't object, you waive it. If she didn't see it, she heard about it, it's hearsay. I can't think of any exception on that basis. I was told that he kicked her, unless it was by the declare. She said she was kicked by him, and she told her immediate, and she's describing her present sense. But really, that's hearsay. And if she saw it, she can clearly testify what she saw. Like I said, in federal court, the rules of inclusion, most stuff comes in. 404B is pretty much granted. And it's very damaging. Other crimes, similar crimes that show motive. And you got to wonder. The government took this case after it spent a lot of time preparing it. Like David said, these are discretionary cases. We took cases, and when you have to go before, at least when I did back then, there was an indictment review committee. They had to review your indictment. You did this lengthy memo, what the charges were, what the evidence are, who your witnesses are. You had to, and then your committee would approve it, because I didn't want to get a bunch of people indicting cases and they lose and their statistics go down. As far as that witness, that's a really tricky situation because if she truly is a victim, like they're claiming, you don't want to browbeat her and force her to come testify and cause more damage to her. And especially if she comes and says, I can't do it, I can't remember, I got PTSD. Well, they're not going to put her on the stand, you know? And they threaten to hold people a lot of times. One thing to say, I don't want to participate. It's another if you have significantly suffered and you're in fear of your life, they are not going to come after you and prosecute you because that would be targeting the victim again. And it's a really tough call what they do.
Yeah. Vinoo, I got to ask, there was a question earlier. And this so one of the things that's going on that I've seen with this particular trial is people are conflating it with some of the Tony Busby civil lawsuits. He's the attorney out of Houston, Texas, that, you know, every day there was a new Diddy lawsuit for a while and they're still popping up. Some of those are minors who filed those suits. I think there was someone as young as 9. There was also a bunch of men, Vinoo, who said that they were being essayed by Sean Diddy Combs, which would not surprise me in the least. But we're not going to hear anything. I mean, nothing as it relates to those defendants in the civil suits. But is there a chance that, I don't know, that comes back around to another, like, I don't know, even if he is convicted or if he's acquitted, is there the possibility of another federal case against him with some of these other victims?
I doubt it. I think that the government's going to get its conviction, and they've chosen which victims they wanted to go forward with. They were alleged victims, the ones they feel most comfortable with, and he's going to get a very long, if not life sentence, and that'll be it, and then it'll be wrapped up in appeals for years, and it'll be the appellate court's going to go, hey, whatever error, there's harmless. And I said his best chance, and it still may be a very low chance, is on appeal that this case somehow gets to the U.S. Supreme Court because the prosecution overreached. But like I said, there's a calculus that's done. He's probably been educated in that calculus, and they're going to say, look, you probably will lose on appeal. So take your shot. You're going away either way. Take your shot and maybe testify,
Yeah.
And I think that's why I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I'm not saying it's a probability, but it's not remote either. So I think that they've been prepping him, and if the calculus that they've done is that he's not going to win on appeal with all the tons of motions. I mean, I've looked at the docket. There's been so much motion practice. Then I think it becomes more realistic that you hear from him.
Yeah.
Joel, every trial lawyer, any serious case, you have a talk with the client. And they all want to know, what are my odds? What are my chances? And he's got very good lawyers, and they're going to tell him what the chances are. And a lot of times the trial lawyers in the case do not know if the client's testifying until the moment the government rests. Because then you go back and do another recalculation, because now you have to summarize what the government has already presented. And do we present any evidence? And do we have the defendant testify? And that's a completely another scenario. And it's not an easy decision, because I tell you, sometimes family members get involved, the people who aren't going to be doing the jail time. And it's hard when you tell the loved one or the wife or spouse, hey, listen, or the parent, you don't understand, it's a danger zone, because it's ultimately the defendant's choice.
Now, are you saying that every client asks you the percentage of, like, what the chances of them getting off on acquittal are? Is that what you're saying?
100%. They'll ask you, do I need to testify? What's the best? What's your strategy? Or am I going to testify? You prep every client as though they're going to testify, right? You prepare them. I don't say prepare them, tell them to lie, but you at least go over and teach them how to answer a question, only the question answered. look at the jury when you are answering a question. Don't be evasive. Don't get combative with the prosecutor. Those are the worst things. And when you come across and fair, you do much better than if you come across abrasive and get an argument.
Welcome to all there's a lot of new viewers coming in to STS Nation who are checking us out for this trial, and appreciate you being here. I think we've got some memberships that we're going to divvy on up and hand out, and I hope you'll come back. We do a live talk show like this 5 days a week, and then we break in with breaking true crime and other newsworthy events. Vinoo Varghese, he is a new friend of ours. He is a Harvard Law visiting faculty member, a white-collar criminal defense attorney, and a former prosecutor, and he works out of New York, New York. So, Vinoo, your final thoughts, but let me ask you one last question.
Sure.
One of the patterns that we've seen, and we saw this today with Courtney, with Capricorn Clark, I don't know why I called her Courtney, but is a credibility issue potentially, because she came back to Sean Diddy Combs, and I want to underscore this because I'm not trying to say that she's not a victim. I think that she is. I think that Sean Diddy Combs is an awful person, but I think the jury's got to weigh this, and they're going to wonder. She came back a second time and then a third time, and we've seen this pattern with other people. Now, this is obviously a very powerful guy and a very wealthy guy who's also paying them and giving them their livelihood. So I think you have to factor all that in. But what kind of issue is credibility for someone like Capricorn Clark when she openly admits on the stand, yeah, I quit, came back, quit, came back, quit, came back, etc.?
Look, I'd like to think as a defense lawyer that credibility is important. But, again, I'm just going to say it again, when they throw that out and the prosecutor is going to say stuff, that's going to be really overstepping the bounds, because when they get into closing, and Tim mentioned this before, they get to go twice, right? So think about it. They open the case. Then when after the evidence is presented and whatever the defense does, whether they present a case or not, they get to do their first summation, then the defense goes, and then they get to rebut. And so they get the last word technically twice. And in that time, I'm going to throw a little inside baseball out for Tim out there. I had a case where we filed a motion for acquittal, 29, and then a motion for a new trial. And the judge said it was very close on legal sufficiency, but we won the motion for a new trial. I defended in the Second Circuit and won. We did a retrial. We got an acquittal here in federal court in the Eastern District and right across the thing. And the reason I bring that up is that it's the issues that we think are important as jurors and as the way that things should be in federal court. It's just like, like let's just get the guy convicted and move on, and he's going to be there. So I would like to think that's important, but they're going to spin it, the prosecutors, as she was a victim and she knew better, and he was so powerful she had to come back.
Well said. So Vinoo, final question. Does this end in a conviction if you had to take a guess today?
Yes.
Yes. And one more final question. The government says that, again, they're going to be done a week early, which would be not next week, the week after. Does this end a lot earlier than most of us think? Because it was tentatively scheduled to go till July 4th.
So the prosecution does this routinely. They do this to really screw with the defense. So you have to have been around a long time and go through a number of trials at the federal level to understand that this is a tactic. And so they will go in, they'll put this huge witness list, and then they'll whittle down their case. And it may even end earlier than that. It would be surprising if it even went as long as they're now saying that it does. So I think and that's a defense tactic, because all of a sudden you're like, okay, wow, I had this guy ready. He's only available, assuming that there is going to be a defense case. So, yeah, I mean, I see it. Hopefully, I imagine his team, though, they're seasoned lawyers. I mean, these guys are very good lawyers. They're worthy, and I think they're probably ready for that.
Yeah. I can't, to be honest, I can't see the government going another 2 full weeks, but we'll see what time tells us. Meanwhile, Tim Jansen, he is the famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, good friend of mine, good friend of the show. And we turn to Tim for all things Dan Markel and Donna Adelson, but everything else as well. I didn't even read this comment. Not going to lie, Capricorn Cassie coming back after such horrendous behavior is a problem for me. There you go. I know about course for control, but still it's a problem. There you go. Being honest. Someone says in the chat that it takes 7 times, coming back 7 times before a person can break from a coercive control situation. So I in no way, again, am I saying that these women were not verbally and or physically abused, because I am confident that they were. The question is, how do the jurors view all this? Tim Jansen, what about that? I mean, what about the credibility of some of this testimony? That's question number 1 before we wrap it up.
Well, in theory, the jury gets that when they start deliberating, Cassie is not going to be an important witness in the case. There's going to be so much evidence. She's going to be like, if you have ice cream, she's going to be the cherry on top, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are jury instructions they give you. If a witness says or did something that's inconsistent with what she said or did in court, you make that decision. Is it because she gave some inconsistent testimony on cross-examination? You said you made a phone call, then you said you didn't make a phone call. You told the government one thing at one point, that he had a gun or didn't have a gun. And then she goes, well, I don't recall if London was on the phone. Maybe she was. So that's not abnormal. People make it. It's a long time ago. Her credibility is important, but it's people want to believe what they believe. They let them write notes, but I don't know if this judge does. Some do let them write notes. Some don't. So they don't rely on the notes. Your notes are no better than anybody else when you get in that deliberation room. They're going to take an initial vote. Out of 12 people, I think you're going to have 8 or 9 that are going to say guilty already. And then you're going to have 2 or 3 that are going to say, okay, well, let's look at the evidence. Let's see what they got for lunch. They heard they feed you really good in federal court, right? So let's not come back too soon, because we don't want Diddy's people to think we just were rubber stamps. All of that plays into a jury verdict. You don't think it does. And if you don't think crazy things happen, just wait till you see jury questions. You get questions that are like, who are these people? How did they get in the jury room? Right? So, but they are the ones selected, usually by the judge in federal court. A long time ago, when I started like 38 years ago, we were able to ask questions of the jurors in our federal court. Now we don't really get any questioning of the federal jurors.
Yeah. And Tim, let me ask you one other thing. So, we're talking about potential jury nullification, which essentially means if there's a fan, like a quiet fan of Diddy's on the jury, and they go through this whole process, and that one person all along was going to acquit, that's a problem. But now we're talking about this witness number 3, and some people have mentioned this, that quote unquote Sean Combs has gotten to this person. And we heard in testimony already that he had a fixer. And I'm not saying this has happened or will happen, but I'm asking you, what happens if they potentially were able to get to a single juror and say, and this is a hypothetical, here is $1 million. You don't have to go on Jeopardy. Here you are. This is your game show. You say acquit at the end and you get $1 million. How do you ever protect against something along those lines if it were to happen?
It can happen. It doesn't happen like it did with Al Capone. But I will say, if I'm the defense team, right, I would file a motion in limine under seal, asking the judge, I don't want the government to be able to argue in closing that a witness they mentioned in opening was not here. And I don't want them inferring that something happened to that witness, because that's not evidence before this jury. There's no evidence. If I'm the prosecution, I'm going to do it subtly, more subtle, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we told you in opening what's going to happen. You heard about the violence. You saw the people he has out there, the enforcers out there. And while we brought the evidence that we were able to bring to you, you hang it out there, right? You leave that inference that that's why that witness didn't show up. and they probably do that on rebuttal because then the defense lawyer can't respond to it. That's where they hit you with the daggers in rebuttal. And it's such a strong thing that defense lawyers never recover and the defendant never recovers.
Well, so finally, Tim, is he convicted when this is all said and done and it goes to the jury?
I'm taking the 99% odds that's in federal court that he's going to be convicted.
The Vegas odds. You heard it right there. Tim and Vinoo, both criminal defense attorneys saying that he will likely get convicted, but you also heard Vinoo say that who knows, maybe he could win an appeal. You just never know, which is what makes this even more fascinating. But important to point out, this is not a game. This is not Vegas. These are not betting lines. These are people's lives with very competent attorneys like Vinoo and Tim. So only time will tell. I'm just thinking to myself while looking at my shirt accidentally that I hope that Sean Combs and his bodyguards are not watching this because I don't know. He's got ties to Miami, and I don't want to get yelled at or otherwise.
He knows who you are.
He might, and I don't want him to know where I live because it could end really badly. Good thing my kids know jujitsu, so there you go. All right, I think I've run out of things to say. We're gonna be back. By the way, if you don't know, we're doing live updates every day at 12:45 p.m. through the duration of this trial, giving you the updates, and then we're coming back with it either an evening program on this or another trial. And Tim is staying on top of all the Dan Markel Adelson stuff. And if we get news, we will bring that to you as quickly as we can. And Vinoo, the weather is changing. Spring has sprung in New York, and it's baseball season, but it's also basketball season. So go Knicks. Love you, America. Love you, Tallahassee. Love you, New York. And let's get justice for Diddy's victims. We will see you all tomorrow. Just stick around 1 second.